Good morning students. Welcome back to physics class. Today we are going to start our new chapter, that is chapter number 11, the human eye and the colorful world. Okay. So you have studied in the previous chapter about refraction of light by lenses. You also studied the nature. How can these ideas help us in the study of the human eye? The human eye uses light and enables us to see objects around us, isn't it? It has a lens in its structure. What's the function of the lens in a human eye? How do the lenses used in spectacles correct defects of vision? Let us consider these questions in this chapter.
You can identify a flower by smelling and touching it. But you can't identify a color without the sense of vision. Hear that honking sound? It's probably a car coming around the corner, right? Can you guess what kind of a car it is? Not really. Not without looking at it. The human eye is the organ of sight for human beings. Your eye transforms light waves reflected from objects that you see into images. The information about these images is then sent to your brain. Based on this information, your brain creates a picture of what you look at. This is how your eye enables you to see. Your eyes can also sense geographic directions, movement and color of objects, and light sources. In a technical sense, your eye can be considered an optical device. That is, an instrument of vision that detects light. Let's look at how this optical device works. First, we'll examine the structure of the eye. A human eye is spherical in shape, with a diameter of approximately 1 inch. It constitutes about 30 major and minor parts. Let's start with the sclera, or sclerotic. Sclera is a tough white fibrous tissue that protects and contains the internal parts of the eye. The next part is the cornea, a tough membrane covering the front surface of the eye that is bulged out. The cornea refracts the light that enters the eye. Behind the cornea lies a jelly-like substance called the aqueous humor. It enables the eye to cope with the changes in the atmospheric pressure. The iris forms the colored part of the eye. The iris adjusts the size of a tiny hole called the pupil to control the amount of light entering the eye. The next part of the eye is the crystalline lens. The crystalline lens is a transparent, biconvex structure in the eye, which, along with the cornea, helps to refract light so that it can be focused on the retina. The ciliary muscle is a ring-like structure attached to the iris. It helps focus images by contracting or relaxing as required to change the shape and focal length of crystalline lens. Thus, it ensures proper vision by changing the focal length of the eye lens based on the distances of objects in the line of vision. The space between the lens and the retina in the eye is filled with a clear, dense, jelly-like fluid called vitreous humor. The vitreous humor helps focus the image clearly on the retina and maintains the shape of the eye. The innermost part of the eye is called the retina. The retina may be considered as the screen where an image is formed when light passes into the eye. the retina is spread all through the interior of the eye behind the lens, forming a canopy of the nerve endings of the optical nerves. The retina contains two main types of light-sensitive cells, called rods and cones. Through optical nerves, the retina connects the eye to the brain. When retina receives an optical image, it converts the image into optical impulses and relays these impulses to the brain through the optical nerve. The brain then interprets these signals to an image of the object viewed through the eye. That's how the eyes help us to see. Here is a quick summary of the various parts of the eye and their functions. Now let's see how these parts come together to help us see when we are looking at something. When light rays reflect from an object towards an eye, the cornea refracts these rays so that they are incident on the lens. The cornea is responsible for maximum refraction of the light incident on the eye. With the help of involuntary movement of the ciliary muscles, the iris and the pupil control the light entering the eye and incident on the lens. The crystalline lens, being biconvex in nature, refracts the light rays it receives. It helps in final focusing of the light on the retina to form a real image. The retina converts the light energy of the image into electrical impulses, using light-sensitive nerve cells called rods and cones. The rod cells are responsible for the perception of the brightness of light, and the cone cells for the perception of color. The electric impulses from the retina are relayed to the brain by the optic nerve. These impulses indicate the brightness and color of the image to the brain. The brain interprets these impulses and produces the sense of vision. Sounds like a long process, doesn't it? The amazing thing is that the eye completes this process in a fraction of a second, enabling us to see. The way your eye enables you to see is very similar to the functioning of another common optical device, the camera. To form images, all SLR cameras use the same principles of refraction of light rays by lenses and interpretation of colors and brightness. Similar to the iris in the eye, a camera has an iris diaphragm to control the light entering the camera. The screen that contains a photographic film in a camera is similar to the retina in the eye. When we use a camera to ensure clarity of images, we adjust the focal length of its lens based on the distance of the object. How does your eye do that? What happens when you switch from reading a newspaper to looking at the television at the end of the room? Or look up to see a plane in the sky? As mentioned earlier, ciliary muscles help obtain the focus of objects located at different distances. Your eye can change the focal length of the lens in a fraction of a second when you look at another object. This ability of the eye to change focus for objects at different distances by altering the curvature of the lens is called accommodation. For an object to be seen clearly, the image must be formed on the retina. The distance between the lens and the retina is fixed. So, how do you think the eye is able to focus on objects at different distances? Remember the relation between the object distance u, image distance v, and focal length f of a lens? Let's refresh your memory. The relation between the object distance u, image distance v, and focal length f is represented by the expression 1 divided by f is equal to 1 divided by v minus 1 divided by u. In this relation, all distances are measured from the center of the lens. Applying this formula for the eye, image distance is the distance between the lens and the retina, which remains constant. The object distance is the distance of the object from the eye lens, which may vary. Therefore, to form a clear image of different objects at different distances from the eye, the focal length of the eye lens has to be changed. And how do we do that? By altering its thickness, of course. For example, to focus on a distant object, the eye needs to increase the focal length of the lens. To do this, the thickness of the lens should be decreased. Conversely, to decrease the focal length, the thickness of the eye lens should be increased. To accomplish this task, ciliary muscles are used. The contraction and relaxation of these muscles helps to alter the curvature of the lens. For instance, let's revisit the scenario when a person switches from reading the paper to looking at the television at the end of the room. As the television set is relatively far from the eye, the light rays from the television are almost parallel and do not require much convergence to be focused on the retina. Hence, the focal length of the crystalline lens needs to be increased to focus on the images on the television. In such situations, the ciliary muscles relax. This decreases the lens thickness, in turn increasing the focal length for clear vision. On the other hand, the light rays from an object located close to the eye, like the newspaper, are divergent and require relatively more convergence. Therefore, to focus on such objects, the focal length of the lens should be decreased. This happens when the lens is comparatively thicker. Therefore, to focus on objects closer to the eye, in this case the newspaper, the ciliary muscles contract. This increases the lens thickness, in turn decreasing the focal length. In this way, accommodation of lens helps us to focus on objects at different distances and see things clearly. So, think about what happens when Jerry switches from looking at the sunset to solving his physics problems. Do you think his ciliary muscles need to work in this scenario? Let's see. Looking at the sunset, Jerry is seeing a distant object. However, when he works on his physics questions, he is looking at his notebook closer to his eyes. The ciliary muscles in his eyes will need to accommodate this change in distance. Long exposure of the eyes to ultraviolet light, effects of diabetes, hypertension, and old age can result in a condition called cataract. People suffering from cataract display a cloudy translucent eye lens. Cataract affects the ability of the eye to accommodate the change of distances. As a cataract matures, the cloudiness on the lens increases. This reduces the amount of light entering the eye, resulting in significant loss of vision, sometimes blindness. An appropriate surgical procedure or laser treatment can rectify a cataract in most cases.